It's 5:05 and welcome into a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. A state of emergency remains in effect for North Carolina as a major winter storm, which will include snow, sleet, and freezing rain, gets ready to take aim at the state as we head into this weekend. That state of emergency was issued, as we talked about, by a Democrat Governor Josh Stein on Wednesday. This storm is set to be massive, spanning some 35 states, essentially from Nevada all the way to Rhode Island, and could affect as many as nearly 200 million people. We're looking at record-setting snowfall, dangerously icy conditions throughout the good chunks of the United States. Yesterday, Governor Josh Stein, alongside state emergency management officials, held a press conference in Raleigh to provide information to the state as to what some of those preparations have looked like. Governor Josh Stein opening his comments, talking about what some of those conditions are and how you could best be prepared. Here's the governor.
For much of the state, folks will see ice instead of snow. And whether you find yourself facing ice or snow, we've all got to be prepared for whatever impacts may come. Yesterday, I declared a state of emergency across North Carolina to get ready for the storm. We've activated the State Emergency Response Team, which is a cross-agency group that includes the Department of Transportation, the Department of Public Safety, the North Carolina National Guard, the State Highway Patrol, and our state's utilities.
The governor also highlighted some of the impacts of the storm, the forecast changing throughout the week. Originally, it looked like it would be more snow than sleet and freezing rain. However, as model consistency has improved over the last couple of days, it would appear that most of the state, outside of maybe the most northern areas of North Carolina, are likely to see more of a freezing rain and sleet event. The governor talked about that as well.
This winter storm will likely impact the majority of the state. At this time, our greatest concerns are potential power outages and road safety over the coming days. Ice accumulation may lead to power outages, and we recommend everyone keep their devices charged, have a flashlight and battery-operated radio on hand, and think about what you may need to stay warm and fed if you lose power. Precipitation and freezing temperatures may also make a mess of our roads, even with the 300,000 gallons of brine that NCDOT has already put down. Thawing and refreezing leads to black ice, so everyone needs to be careful on the roads for not only during the storm, but for a few days after the storm hits. Please avoid driving unless it is necessary to travel. This will keep you safe and the roads clear for first responders and anyone else who must be on the road.
The governor highlighting an important point there. Unlike usual winter weather that we do see here in North Carolina, which can happen about a time or two a year depending on the season, it is set to be brutally cold in the immediate aftermath of this storm. Temperatures as we head even into the portions of middle to late next week. Low temperatures still in the 20s or even teens, depending on where you are in North Carolina. So some of those impacts could linger, at least into the early parts of next week with this winter weather. Obviously, with the risk of ice, we are, of course, talking about power outages. And with that, you could be looking at, some folks across the state could be looking at days without commercial power from major utilities like Duke Energy. The governor says it's time to prepare.
First of all, stay informed. Make sure you're following your local media, the National Weather Service, and your local emergency management agency. Second, get prepared. Think about what you would need during and after a major storm. Things like enough water, non-perishable food, medication, and supplies for 3 to 5 days for each person and pet in your household. Also, flashlight, fresh batteries, a way to keep your phone charged, blankets, and winter clothing. Visit readync.gov for more detailed information about how you can best prepare. Next, make a plan. How will you safely heat your home if the power goes out? How will you cook safely if the power is out? And what will you eat if cooking is not an option? Where will you go if you cannot stay at home? Finally, let me repeat this. Starting Saturday, please do everything you can to stay off the roads. Unless you're a first responder or essential personnel, please don't drive unless you have to drive. Fortunately, we have 2 days to make sure that we have everything we need to ride out this storm. Don't wait until it's too late. And if as you're getting ready, don't forget to check on your loved ones and neighbors and anyone who might be especially vulnerable, including the elderly. None of us can control what this storm will ultimately look like, but each of us can get prepared. Be ready to stay home for a few days, potentially without power, and know that we are taking this storm seriously and we will do everything we can to keep you safe.
Multiple individuals at the press conference Thursday. Obviously, you just heard the governor there say we have 2 days to prep. That is now 1 day due to the fact that this happened yesterday in Raleigh. Will Ray, who is the emergency management director here in North Carolina, talked about finalizing all of that prep as well and commented once again on travel as what that will look like in the coming days here across the Tar Heel State.
The State Emergency Response Team has been activated here at the State Emergency Operations Center as well as at our regional coordination centers in Kinston, Burlington, and Hickory. Key partners such as the Department of Transportation, the North Carolina National Guard, and the State Highway Patrol, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services, are working to address any resources or support that is requested by our local communities. We've also activated our warehouses in Burlington and in Baden and Stanley County. As of this morning, the State Emergency Response Team has provided water, meals, medical supplies, and heating equipment to local communities or partners who have requested that support. We're mobilizing elements of the North Carolina National Guard over the course of today and tomorrow to be able to assist with stranded motorists, assisting first responders with their emergency response, roadway clearance, and commodity distribution. Additionally, we are placing aviation assets from the North Carolina National Guard and the State Highway Patrol on standby for any rescue or movement of critical resources and personnel into impacted communities as this storm moves out of the state later this weekend and as conditions allow. Hotspot crews are being deployed along our major roadways, primarily in western North Carolina, along I-40 in Clyde, I-40 at Old Fort in McDowell County, on the Saluda Grade in Polk County, along I-77 and US 321 at Turner Grade in Surry County. As a reminder, these are combination teams of the NCDOT and North Carolina National Guard to ensure safe movement and address stranded vehicles from along our major roadways. These teams will be moved around those impacted areas as needed.
Those are some of the key partners that DOT and state emergency management officials will be working with in the coming days to make sure that if greater issues do arise during the winter storm, they are able to deal with it. This is now some discussion over travel, which, again, everybody is advised not to this weekend.
As the governor stressed, we would ask all North Carolinians to finalize preparations by Friday night and plan to stay off the roads this weekend. Unnecessary travel not only puts you at risk, but also the public safety personnel, power crews, and DOT workers who are working to respond to emergencies, to restore power, and to clear roadways quickly. If you must drive in winter conditions, our partners with the State Highway Patrol advise reducing speed significantly, increasing the following distance between you and other vehicles, and clearing all snow and ice from your vehicle before traveling. Given the forecast, let's make their work easier by staying off the roads unless absolutely necessary.
That's the voice of Will Ray. He is the director of the North Carolina Emergency Management Director, I should say, here across the state of North Carolina, providing additional coverage and information as it relates to the state emergency response team, and again, stressing what you'd already heard from Democrat Governor Josh Stein about the treacherous travel conditions that likely will play out throughout the weekend. Again, a state of emergency remains in effect for North Carolina. Winter weather advisories also posted for the vast majority of the state as well, outside a couple of counties in the eastern and southeastern most portions of North Carolina. We will hear more from this press conference. We'll also catch up with Teresa Opeka from CarolinaJournal.com about what Duke Energy is doing in preparation. As we know, with comes ice, comes the possibility of power outages. We'll catch up with Teresa Opeka coming up here in just a few minutes. It's now 5:15 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. We'll head back to the traffic center, get a look at the roadways on your Friday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick. Good.
It's 21 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. While North Carolina faces a pending veto override vote on its own measure to embrace a brand new federal government program known as a school choice tax credit scholarship, Georgia, one of our neighbors, has already stepped forward, becoming the latest state to opt into the program. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, a Republican, announced the move during a press conference earlier this week, saying in part, "Now that we have a like-minded partner in the White House with President Trump, I'm grateful that the positive impacts of the Georgia Goal Scholarship will not only be embraced by this federal tax credit, but also replicated across the country," in reference to a state tax credit scholarship program that already exists in the state of Georgia. The federal tax credit program was authorized under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act enacted by Congress in early July of last year, signed into law on July the 4th, Independence Day of 2025, by President Donald Trump. The program would be associated with contributions made by individuals to designated scholarship granting organizations, or SSOs, which in turn would issue stipends to students for private school expenses, including tuition and other allowable costs. A key feature is that donors receive a dollar-for-dollar reduction in their income tax, effectively making the donations cost-free, with taxpayers allowed to donate as much as $1,700 per year. You're not going to be able to write $1 million check and write it off, but adding $1,700 worth of deductions could be a lot for many families. The program is set to begin in 2027, and it allows families earning up to 3 times the median income for their area to qualify for the scholarship. While the legislation provides significant funding, estimated to cost nearly $26 billion through the calendar year 2034, its implementation largely depends on whether individual states, and by extension their local governments, opt into the program. North Carolina, meanwhile, remains sidelined. A bill designed to opt North Carolina into the program fell prey to the veto pen of Democrat Governor Josh Stein in August, with the fate of that legislation now resting on a potential veto override sometime during this legislative short session, which is not likely to begin until after the primary rolls around. So we'd be looking at sometime in mid to late March at the earliest in the North Carolina General Assembly. It's important to note that lawmakers have yet to schedule a vote, but successfully overturning this veto would require a 3/5 majority in both chambers of the North Carolina General Assembly. So we will keep an eye on the legislative calendar, as we do typically throughout the week, and let you know as soon as that potentially pops up on there. Dr. Bob Lubke, who is the director of the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation, underscored the implications of this federal legislation and moving forward with this veto override for North Carolina, saying, quote, "I hope Governor Stein is watching what's going on nationally. States are opting into this federal tax credit scholarship program because it is a win-win situation." He warned that Stein's veto means that students in North Carolina, whether they attend public or private schools, will not be able to benefit from the new federal tax credit, noting that the credit was written to allow eligible students, no matter where they attend school, to benefit. The governor's veto merely ensures that all the money donated by generous North Carolinians to help students will go to benefited students in other states. Recent analysis from a group called Education Week shows that a total of 18 states already have opted in or said they will opt in for the program. 4 states in total have already opted out, with the remaining states have yet to decide. And just taking a step back on that, pretty remarkable. This legislation only came to reality in July of last year. 18 states have already opted in or already have a framework to make that possible. We will continue to track the progress here in North Carolina. We'll let you know as soon as we get a date officially, a hard date on the calendar. We'll bring it to you right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. In some other statewide news this morning, the North Carolina Tobacco Trust Fund Commission is now accepting grant applications for 2026 with organizations that support the agricultural industry, impact rural communities, and revive the economy, all welcome to apply. The chairman of that organization, William Teague, said, "These grants are an important investment in the future of North Carolina's agriculture. The 2026 grant cycle will continue to support innovative projects that help farmers, the ag business, and rural communities adapt and grow." The applications are due March the 6th, so coming up here in a couple of months, and an application deadline and all of the other guidelines can be found on their website, with grant awardees receiving funds for selected projects coming up in the fall of this year. Why is this relevant? Well, North Carolina produces 260.1 million pounds of tobacco annually, accounting for nearly 60% of the United States tobacco production, and as we have seen for decades now, making North Carolina the #1 producer of tobacco in the nation. According to data from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, in 2024, North Carolina exported nearly $6 billion in goods to China, $1.2 billion to Japan, $13 billion to Asia as a whole, and $9.7 billion to the European Union. In 2022, North Carolina exported some $533 million, more than $500 million worth of tobacco. The state also has a whopping 822 tobacco farms, generating that $557 million in revenue and adding nearly $200 million to the state's GDP each and every year. Tobacco manufacturers in the state generate $36 billion in input and contribute $31 billion to the GDP as a whole, employing approximately 5,000 workers and paying them some $370 million in wages throughout the year. Tobacco wholesalers also generate staggering amounts of revenue, $15 billion there, and adding $9 billion to the GDP, as well as supporting another 4,500 jobs across the state of North Carolina. The General Assembly, back in the year 2000, created the North Carolina Tobacco Trust Fund Commission to support members of the tobacco community, including farmers, workers, and industry-adjacent businesses. According to a press release, funding for the compensation comes from the tobacco industry and annual payments resulting from master settlement agreements and other payments into the package. We have got some additional details and coverage on this 2026 North Carolina Tobacco Trust Fund Commission and their grant application. You can read those details by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. The story's headline, Tobacco Trust Fund Accepting 2026 Grant Applications. It's now 5:29 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. We will head back to the traffic center, get another look at the roadways on your early Friday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick.
It's 5:36. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. All eyes remaining on the sky as we continue forecasting some major winter weather that is expected not only across the state of North Carolina, but all the way from Texas up to portions of New England, as a major winter weather system is set to leave some pretty devastating impacts throughout the United States, and now focusing here on North Carolina. The real risk is ice, less snow, sleet, and freezing rain. To walk us through a recent press conference that took place on Thursday with the governor and some folks here in North Carolina, Teresa Opeka, CarolinaJournal.com, joins us on the News Hour. Teresa, it's not often that you see some of the ice totals that are being predicted. What is the latest that you're tracking out of state government?
Sure. Good morning, Nick. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we've been joking a lot, maybe even as last weekend. There were predictions about snow, and maybe it snowed for a few minutes and basically ended. But this time, this is real. There were major predictions the beginning of the week when everybody was in consensus, and now it is upon us. Hoping for more snow, but unfortunately it looks like it's going to be more of a major ice storm being compared to one that took place in December of 2002 that left people without power for as long as about 10 days in some respects. So that's why Governor Josh Stein declared a state of emergency on Wednesday, as soon as the National Weather Service declared a winter storm watch for the area on that day. As you said, it's not just for North Carolina. This is spanning right across the U.S. You've got from Nevada all the way up to Rhode Island. The Northeast is supposed to see maybe in feet of snow, 1 to 2 feet in some places, like New York City too, for instance. But unfortunately, like I said, it looks like we're going to get a lot of ice, and that means more than likely power outages, probably for a little bit of length of time. So Governor Stein had other officials there from NCDOT, emergency management, and others to discuss what they were doing to prepare for this storm and some tips that people can take. Like he said, they have the operation, their command center up and running. Also, they have the State Emergency Response Team. That consists of DOT, Department of Public Safety, National Guard, State Highway Patrol, and all the utilities. They're all activated. They're all ready and getting ready for the storm. Is supposed to be maybe catastrophic in some respects.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those impacts. And Teresa, one of the things that came to my mind, and again, the forecast is still a little bit dynamic. The storm is moving west to east, so the western half of North Carolina will start seeing some of those impacts as we get into the day on Saturday, the eastern half as we move through the day Saturday into Sunday, and even potentially portions of Monday morning. But we talk about ice, and obviously more, anywhere around half an inch above starts creating some major problems for the electrical grid. And Teresa, it looks like the western half of the state is going to get hit particularly hard. This is an area where I'm sure they've just spent the last year rebuilding a lot of that infrastructure that was all washed away from Hurricane Helene. What a miserable situation out there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There was a question raised at the press conference or the media briefing asking about, water resources, the infrastructure, all of that in the western part of the state. And unfortunately, Governor Stein said, we really can't pinpoint where things are going to happen because nobody actually, you don't have a crystal ball, right? But they are prepared to maybe have aviation helicopters surveilling the area or bringing in supplies if needed. But the people in western North Carolina and the mountains suffered so greatly from Helene when that happened in September of 2024. And now this is coming on top of it. In addition, you mentioned western portions of the state. Also, the Charlotte area looks to be getting a lot of ice out of this storm as well. But adding insult to injury about a year and a half later for western North Carolina when they're trying to rebuild and getting back up on their feet, hopefully this doesn't undo some of that work, the hard work that's been put into that.
Yeah, and some of those repairs, especially for infrastructure out west, Teresa, a lot of that is still temporary in a lot of places. Fortunately, through the major thoroughfares in major towns, they've got, full-size poles and things of that back up, but still a lot of temporary infrastructure in the recovery from Helene. Before we continue our focus on more of the electricity outages, Teresa, roadway is obviously a big problem. We aren't suited like the Northeast with thousands of snow plows and ice trucks. However, it does appear that DOT and emergency management officials have got their crews and their contractors out and about spraying brine, dropping salt to try and mitigate as much of the road freezing as possible.
Yes, and during the press conference, NCDOT Secretary Daniel Johnson said they have more than 2,000 specially trained employees. As you mentioned, about 1,100 of those were spraying the brine as early as Wednesday to try to keep ahead of the beginnings of the storm. In that respect, and they sprayed over 3,300 gallons of brine. Also, they wanted to let us all know that there are at least 1,200 dump trucks that can be fitted to clear snow and ice, and many more contract trucks and motor graders on standby. Some equipment's also being staged in trouble zones or hot spots. And someone asked at the press conference, what do you mean by a hot spot? Mainly in the western part of the state where there's a steeper incline, you've got really hilly terrain where maybe it's more difficult, especially if that gets icy, you're not going to be making it up a hill or a steep incline. So they have people positioned at those areas. They also have more than 150,000 tons of salt to treat the roads, and they're actively securing additional supplies to replenish that. But he also said, be prepared. I'm getting ahead of myself here. First, they're going to take care of the interstates and then 4-lane highways, other state roads, and then secondary roads would come in last. But as I was just mentioning, be prepared. Even if this storm ends before Monday, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods, because there's going to be really cold, freezing temperatures behind this. You're seeing highs maybe in the 30s for all of next week, and maybe lows in the teens. So even if it's sunny, you've got to get to a certain point before salt and all that solution doesn't work any longer. And then when the temperatures drop overnight, everything's going to refreeze if it's not already frozen to begin with. So we've, sorry about the pun, we got a long road ahead of us.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And that is one of the things that makes this setup unique, going back to that storm from the early 2000s. We are fortunate here in the southern half of the United States. After winter storm events, typically, Teresa, it's only a day or two, and you get temperatures in the 40s, 50s, sometimes even 60s, which allows that ice and snow, whatever other sort of debris falls, to erode away pretty quickly. But that's not going to happen, as you noted, when you've got temperatures pretty much all through next week in the mid to low 30s, temperatures at night in the teens, even single digits in the western half of North Carolina. So some big time problems there. Let's go back to one of the major risks with this, which is power outages. It's going to be brutally cold, Teresa, for the foreseeable future, at least through the middle or latter parts of next week. Temperatures are cold. Power could be out for an extended period of time. You had the opportunity to catch up with Duke Energy. That's the state's largest electrical producer and provider. Presumably they've got crews on standby, but as you noted at the Open, Teresa, this system is affecting all the way up from Nevada to Rhode Island. So a lot of these contract crews that come in immediately after storms, I would imagine those resources are going to be probably pretty thin as well, as we could be looking at millions of people without power in states all over the country.
Yeah, I would imagine so. When I did talk to a spokesperson from Duke, Duke Energy, she said that, yeah, they have some crews that they can call in, but you are wondering, well, if there's like 30 some states are being affected, are they going to be needed in their own states? So that is a very valid question. And that even adds to, well, yeah, you're maybe thinking a couple of days, but maybe this is going to extend into, God forbid, a week. As 2002 did, because so many states are being affected. The weather's not going to warm up and melt anything anytime soon. So what is going to happen? But they said they are prepared and to bring extra crews in. So hopefully that does come to fruition if needed. And they also said they're well prepared. They've been doing some vegetation trimming ahead of time. Usually they do that year round, but they did extra care to cut around trees, because trees in general, not in with an ice storm, they're the number one cause of power outages during any kind of a weather event.
Yeah, and when it's really the ice that creates the real problem for those low-hanging branches or tree limbs, quarter, half inch, anything over half an inch really starts causing those tree branches to break and snap. And of course, many times as we see those knock down those high-strung power utility lines. Teresa, obviously we're keeping coverage of this. It's going to be, as you noted earlier, no pun intended, a rocky road throughout the weekend. One of the things that seemingly has been stressed by everybody is throughout this weekend, it is a safe bet to just stay home. Don't get out on the roads. Keep those clear for emergency crews. God forbid they have to respond to medical emergencies or other events. There's no reason to fight with pedestrian traffic when it's really not necessary.
Yes, absolutely not. There are officials who are cautioning if you can get everything done that you need to get done, all your supplies, your food, your batteries, whatever you need to take care of, do that by Friday evening. Maybe Saturday morning you might be able to sneak out, but it's advised to maybe get everything done before Friday evening sets in. And we do have some helpful tips in our article to talk about this, about safety tips, what to do, different websites to go to, like ncready.gov. That's like a one-stop shop. You've got everything there, from road conditions to power outages to all different things. If you need emergency information, weather forecasts, everything is there. Other tips as well. Here's one notable tip that maybe we don't think about. I'm just going to point this out. Have enough cash on hand. We don't really think about that too much anymore. We're always using an ATM, or you go to the store, get money cash back. You've got a credit card, debit card. Have some cash on hand, because if power does go out and you can't do anything electronically, you want to go out and if you want, make a transaction, maybe you're not going to be able to do that. So that's just a tip just to throw in there, just to, help out people this morning, preparing for the storm ahead of time.
Yeah, no question about it. At the end of the day, Teresa, as much as many of these places want to push everybody to electronic transactions, when the power is out, cash remains king. We've got links and additional tips over on our website this morning. CarolinaJournal.com. We'll keep an eye on the details throughout the weekend. We appreciate the information this morning. Teresa Opeka joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:48 on Charlotte's FM News Talk, 107.9 FM, WBT. We'll head back to the traffic center, get another look at the roadways on your Friday morning commute with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Have an incident.
The John Locke Foundation's Carolina Liberty Conference brings together policymakers, scholars, community leaders, and citizens from across the state to explore the challenges and opportunities of advancing freedom in today's political and cultural climate. And I want to invite you this morning to the 2026 Carolina Liberty Conference. It is taking place in Raleigh, North Carolina, February the 27th and 28th at the Starview Hotel. This year, we will be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution with great guest speakers like Lord Daniel Hannan, Chief Justice Paul Newby, State Auditor Dave Bolick, and more to be announced soon. Register for the 2026 Carolina Liberty Conference today at johnlocke.org. That's JOHNLOCKE.org. Good morning again. It's 5:55. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 FM WBT. All eyes remain on the North Carolina General Assembly as multiple veto overrides have remained on the calendar now 4 months. One of them is embracing a brand new federal government school choice tax credit, and we are starting to see some of our neighboring states begin to act on it. This week, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, the Republican there, announced a move to approve the federal tax credit in the state of Georgia. The federal tax credit was authorized under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act enacted by Congress in July of last year. The program would be associated with contributions made by individuals to designated scholarship granting organizations, which in turn would issue stipends to students for private school expenses, including things like tuition and other allowable costs. A key feature of this legislation and why 18 states have adopted it at this point is that donors receive a dollar-for-dollar reduction in their income taxes, effectively making the donations cost-free from a tax perspective. And individual taxpayers could donate up to $1,700 per tax year, according to the federal legislation. The program is set to begin in 2027, and it allows for families earning up to 3 times the median income for their area to qualify for the scholarship. While the legislation provides significant funding, about $26 billion in total through 2034, its implementation largely depends on whether individual states and their governments opt into the program. Now, the North Carolina General Assembly has already passed legislation that would bring the U.S. in line with this federal program. However, that remains sidelined as the bill was vetoed by Democrat Governor Josh Stein back in August, and lawmakers have yet to reconvene to deal with this and many other veto overrides. Some rumblings from our state capitol indicate that no major votes will be taking place before the March the 3rd primary, so we will keep an eye on the legislative calendar and let you know when this and many other pieces of legislation get to Raleigh. That's going to do it for a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We'll be back with you live Monday morning 5 to 6 right here on Charlotte's FM News Talk 107.9 FM WBT.